Senator Menendez from New Jersey is
Thank you, Mr.
recognized
Chairman.
person.
Thank you for keeping the hearing open. I appreciate it. Thank you to our witnesses. There's no question that our housing stock needs to be expanded and revitalized. As we build to meet the challenges of the 21st century, we should be looking to leverage the power of mass transit so that we can curb climate change, including, I should say, inducing car emissions. And that's why I led the charge with my Livable Communities Act, which creates a federal grant program to incentivize the coordinated development of new affordable housing and transit. By leveraging transportation assets, this legislation will spur economic development, address affordable housing needs, expand access to good jobs, while at the same time cutting carbon emissions. And I'm happy to see that the Build Back Better proposition included $4.5 billion for this innovative housing supply solution. So, Ms. Egger, shouldn't we be strengthening our housing stock in conjunction with transportation hubs so that we can connect people to good jobs and incentivize more energy-efficient mass transit?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Senator. We do see that transportation is often the largest expense after housing and utility costs for families. And we recognize how much of an impact transportation has on climate change in regards to emissions. There are two examples that I can think of that lead credence to the proposal that you're bringing up here. One is through our experience with Green Communities, our national green building program for affordable housing. We actually require that all new construction properties not in rural or tribal locations are located within half a mile of a transit hub for the emissions, the economic reasons that you're alluding to as well. And another example that I'd like to offer is actually in relation to an initiative in Denver, Colorado. We actually just recently celebrated a significant milestone with our Transit-Oriented Development Fund in the Denver regional area, where we've now invested $50 million in creating 2,100 homes that are transit-connected and affordable housing. And this type of investment, as the TOD loans are repaid, the capital goes back into this fund, which can support more developments which have these same attributes. So that's a type of example of fast, flexible, ready capital that can support these types of properties.
Now, turning to a different topic, flooding is the most costly and frequent natural disaster homeowners face. Unfortunately, climate change is only going to make that worse. Right now, most federal assistance to make homes more resilient comes after the natural disaster. Communities would be much better served if the federal government would make more tools available to reduce flood hazards in high-risk areas before the next storm strikes. And for every dollar that we invest in mitigation, it has been proven, the federal government saves $6 in disaster relief spending. So I'd like to be able to invest $1 for every 6 that I'd get back. So shouldn't the federal government make more funding for pre-disaster mitigation to make homes more resilient to flooding before homeowners find themselves in harm's way?
Absolutely, Senator. The preemptive investments are much less costly than fixes after the fact. And if I may share a relevant example from my organization's experience with preventative flooding mitigation measures, we've seen the types of these benefits firsthand. When heavy rainfall flooded New Orleans 5 years ago and tested the Faubourg Lafitte development that Enterprise and Providence Community Housing created and rebuilt after Hurricane Katrina, we saw that about 5 years ago, this deluge flooded the city. Residents found their streets waist deep in water, but Lafitte escaped harm. Water did not breach the first floor of this building because the homes had actually been built 2 feet above baseline flood elevation. So when the water receded, folks were able to return to their daily lives, and there was no need to offer any claims against the National Flood Insurance Program because there was no harm done. So better underground infrastructure is needed to ensure that water drains quickly from cities and communities, but we were able to do what was within our control to reduce risk, and with that type of preemptive investment.
Well, my bipartisan NFIP REACT prioritizes pre-disaster mitigation through increased cost of compliance coverage reforms so that homeowners are up to date with the latest building code requirements. It also creates the availability for elevations and improvements to the nation's most flood-prone homes, and I look forward to working with the chairman on it. May I have one last question, Mr. Chairman? Ms. Egger and Ms. Norton, can investments in existing federal programs like Choice Neighborhoods be leveraged to address climate change by creating long-term sustainable and affordable housing supply? For example, last year, the city of Camden in my home state of New Jersey received a $35 million Choice Neighborhoods grant, which leads to the development of 350 new energy-efficient units of housing and at the same time, as we've been discussing, improves access to mass transit. What do you think about that?
I couldn't agree more. Programs, HUD programs like Choice Neighborhoods and like CDBG DR in particular are ones which can pair resilient, green, efficient building practices with the creation of affordable housing so that those two outcomes are realized simultaneously.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. And the work that we're doing with the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities to build a whole house response to occupied housing, I think Choice Neighborhoods can really, in Camden, build that infrastructure of helping to train contractors. Choice Neighborhoods is building and preparing neighborhoods. One of the things that we can do is help to train from the community the contractors in this resilience work and in flood mitigation work, but also help to map the occupied housing at risk and to be able to know, especially where we have our elderly, residents, or where we have people living in basements or in true flood risk. By using Choice Neighborhood flexible dollars, you're able to really build that infrastructure to know ahead and do assessments and build that workforce capacity, and then align these dollars with weatherization and flexible housing to address those risks that occur. So the Choice Neighborhoods is a catalyst, in effect, to be able to really unlock and unleash the potential of other programs to get ahead of this, especially in the occupied housing, where you will have people much, much more at risk in the older housing stock.
Thank you for your insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Menendez.